Hey, everybody, welcome back for episode 2 of the Young and Hungry podcast. So today, as promised, I have my co-host with me, Dana Baker. So Dana's going to be tuning in for a lot of the episodes. Here he is. Dana, introduce yourself.
So my name is Dana Baker. I don't know if you heard of me. What's up, everybody? Dana here with the Big Baker Boy. Really excited to come on to this podcast with Morgan. It's a really, really fun idea, and I think it's going to go really well.
Yeah,
really excited, man.
We've talked about before, and now it's just we're at a point where we have the time to kind of put into it and do it somewhat consistently. But yeah, man, I'm really happy to have you on. So, guys, Dana, if you didn't know, he's a national champion bodybuilder. He's had a great career, competed many, many times, has coached many clients. The guy has oodles of experience in the fitness industry in regards to even social media, in regards to working with different sponsors.
Thank you very much.
Representing different brands. To me, Dana, as far as in Canada and Atlantic Canada specifically, as far as being an ambassador for the sport, there's not many bigger ones than him around in this area, as far as being well known and just being consistent. So there's Dana's intro. And
thank you very much. I appreciate it. Really do.
So Dana recently, you got a set of balls on you for this. He's one of the only people I know who successfully competed during COVID. A lot of us tried and failed. But so Dana, let's just talk about your experience, like getting ready for Toronto, and then what happened there, and then how you kind of adjusted and did the Amateur Olympia, and looked pretty damn good considering all the bullshit you had to go through to get there.
Well, I mean, as everybody knows, this past year has been just completely unpredictable. We've seen a lot of progress for certain things, but there's been a lot of things that have been uncertain, like closures, lockdowns, and, province to province had different, like there's been times when here in Nova Scotia, it was perfectly fine, which was kind of the majority of the fall. And, other provinces like your guys's, I think you just recently had like a 5 to 6 week in the winter there.
Yeah.
And I mean, other provinces too, man, like Ontario, BC.
Oh yeah.
The whole year has been crazy for everybody. Everyone's in the same boat. So I had planned, I think, well, this is even better because this was an episode 2, because previously, in 2020, before the pandemic started, I was actually prepping to do the Nordic Pro over in Denmark.
Right.
And I think it was 4 weeks out when they shut that down. And then there was like another 6 days where the Gladiator was still going on. And so in my head, I was like, okay, whatever. Like I'm this close. I'll do the Atlantics. And then of course, it all shut down. So when things opened up back in the summer, I kind of I just had the momentum, and Patrick and I work with Patrick Tour, and we got in a really good routine and rhythm, and my work schedule is pretty consistent. So
Dana, can you turn your phone? There you go.
Oh, there we go.
That's better.
So anyways, in the like August, I pulled the trigger. I was like, okay, depending on how things looked in August, that things looked upwards and bright and shiny. So Nova Scotia, we had no issues with any of the shutdowns, the gyms and stuff. So I just kind of pushed through as a normal prep. And the whole time I had the expectation that it was going to be canceled. But that made it a lot easier. I don't know why, but it was just something I was like, I'm going to keep prepping, and in the back of my head, because I mean, Heather's show ran and we made that thing come to a close, I think, right on time, because they had to condense everything because they were going into an orange phase or something. So seeing that, it was kind of like, okay, this is kind of something I have to prepare. Like literally, if this is how it's going to go, I can't pretend. But I don't know, man. Like once it came to the showtime, we flew up there and they canceled it the same day that we flew up. It was like, I think we were just so tired, and excited that it didn't even really register. And my client Dylan, he was with me, and it was his first show. And then Justin too.
Yep.
He was there, so we kind of all just hung out the whole weekend, and we had that photo shoot booked. So we just all sat there, and I was like, look, man, I don't want to have a pity party about this. Like we're all we're all so depleted and we've been taking so much shit that like if we start going down that road of like poor me, I was like, dude, no way. So we just kind of was like, just get it out now. We all kind of hashed it out, and then we had that photo shoot, so we just kept focusing. So that was fine. But when I got home, I was a little jaded. I was like I need to get on stage, right? So
let me stop you there for a second. Is there any way you can like set your phone up on something?
yes.
Yeah, just because it's just a little shaky. So we'll give you a second.
Hold on a sec here, man. We'll start it over. Here we go.
We're back down. We'll keep going. We're just making a little adjustment here. There you go. Perfect. So what was it like, you know, especially the days leading up to that show when they were like changing the venue and there was a lot of uncertainty? Like, how were you guys dealing with that stress? Like, did you have faith that it was going to happen, or were you kind of getting skeptical at that point that it wasn't?
Honestly, man, it really, because the thing is, like the weekend before they ran a show in Ontario. Like this was like, you know, 1 week out. And when it came into it, it was like, I don't really think the problem started until like that Wednesday. Because what happened was, I'm pretty sure every time they changed to a hotel, the people around would call it in because there's like 300-400 athletes showing up. And that's when the Ontario health minister just shut it down. So they changed it the night before, but I think a lot of that had to do with the regional show. So we were a little nervous, but I mean, I don't know, man. It was just kind of like, we had no idea. It was like, there's no way it's not going to run. Like they'll just find a spot.
So that happened. And then when did you decide that you were going to do the Amateur Olympia in Florida?
So that whole weekend, you know, there was a lot going on. There was a lot of changes. Like, you know, the CPA man was just bombarded with just so much stuff. But it was nice because it was Justin and Dylan and I, and we had an Airbnb. So we just kind of hung out and, you know, we were going through our different poses and like, you know, Patrick's idea was like, hey, look, you're there now. You have all your food. Let's just do the plan as we're planned. And then Sunday when you do your shoot, you know, that's kind of your show. So it was kind of not even in my head, but then we went to Pure Muscle and we trained on Friday. That was Friday. And, you know, then of course, Justin, he's on Team HD and he was down there with all those guys. He's staying with Antoine and stuff. So they were all like, hey man, just do the Olympia because it got moved to Orlando that weekend. So that was kind of in my head. And just after the shoot, man, I was like, it was in my head and it was like, well, if I can get the time off for work, etc. You know, I was going to try and pull the trigger, but I was recommended not to do it by Patrick. And this is what's great about coaching and coaches is I asked Patrick about it. I was like, what do you think? And he was like, honestly, with all the restrictions and what you just went through and like the stress and stuff, he's like, I wouldn't bother to pull the trigger. I would just take the time and rest, you know, in terms of what it's worth. Like you could go and do it. And he was like, but if you want to do it, I'll support you. He's like, you know, whatever you want to do. And I was like, no, I'm going to do it.
That would be me. And that was fun. That would be me too.
But you know what? Like, that's the thing. You know, he's going to be straight with me and say, hey, look, like where you're at and what's going to come out of it with all, like, cause he knew like traveling to the US and back to Canada and my job and your income and your mental health. Like, and it's around Christmas time. He's like, if you go down, like you can't spend Christmas with your family.
Yeah.
Cause they got to come back in quarantine. So he's just like, yeah, like, I think we could just wait and just continue to keep trying to, but you know, me, I was just going to do it.
You were ready, man. You were in shape, ready to compete. Like, I don't blame you. I know what that headspace is like, and I would have been on my way down to Florida too.
Well, yeah, it just really came down to if I could get the time off and do it, which it all worked out. But like hindsight, I think that was more driven by like the insecurity of if I didn't do a show and kind of like settle that prep, that it would kind of lead to me forcing myself to be like, oh, I got to do a show. Oh, I got to do a show, you know? So I was worried about dealing with that later. So in my head, I'm like, if I just get down and do the show and then bury it and then move on. But it was a lot, man. Like I had to basically lose a whole month's of pay from work.
Yeah.
But I had it all covered, but it just wasn't smart, right? Like financially. But hey, it's the price I had to pay.
Yeah,
you
man,
know,
and we all make
and that's it.
decisions around that time when we're in contest shape.
Yeah, and it's like I had it all covered, but at the same time I was missing work. So it's like, oh yeah, you're just kind of balancing out something that you shouldn't bother to spend. But that's just the way things are too, man. You either do it or you don't, you know.
So what was the actual experience at the Olympia like?
It was really kind of comforting, because it was a space that I had never been in and the people around. So there was there was like nothing from competing before attached to what I was doing. It was like I was doing a show for the first time, which was really good mentally, because it really just helped me fall into a rhythm. It was a natural rhythm and just space. And as the show kept going on, and it's like the guys I'm competing against are fucking good. So like in your head, you're like, oh, like it gives you that feeling like, you know, this is where I need to be. But then going through the experience and understanding, like, so, you know, understanding like there was the risk of the flights and they got canceled. So I only landed 18 hours before. So, I mean, it doesn't matter how on you are. If you land from a flight 18 hours before a show in a completely different environment, like, you know, the humidity was different, the heat.
Yeah.
So I mean, but that's not even an excuse. That's just the way it was.
Yeah, no,
so,
I know what you're saying. It's just facts. It's just facts, man.
Yeah. So it's like, in terms of, okay, if I had been able to get there sooner and had a couple more days and blah, 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 it's like I could have, you know, presented what I was capable of presenting. But at the same time too, man, like those were all things I had to pivot for, right? Like I left with plenty of time to get there, and then the flights got canceled and delayed me a whole day. Like you just pivot. Like I was doing updates because I got the airline gave me a hotel. So I just stayed there. I was doing updates in the hotel in the morning at 5 a.m. I was in Detroit airport. So I landed in Detroit at like 11. So like 22 hours before. So I go into one of those big changing room bathrooms and I set up my camera and stuff. And I did a whole update for Patrick. And because of the food thing, I was just stuck to banana, cream of rice, and eggs. Like, so I would go to the airport, buy the eggs and just take out the yolks. So I would use that. And I made a whole bunch of cream of rice in the airport before I left. Like it was like 200 grams a meal and then a banana with each and then some eggs. So we just pivoted, man. Yeah. You know, and and in my head, of course, I'm like freaking out. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm not there, supposed to be there last night, you know, but at the same time too, it's like, no, we're just going to keep going, keep updating Patrick, just keep that line of communication open. And then, you know, that saved me from a lot of worse things happening. Right. So yeah, it was good, man. It was different, but it was like a very fresh experience. And it was kind of I had to be okay with things not being perfect. And like, you know, as a bodybuilder, man, like if you're landing 18 hours before the show, it's like, there's a part of you that's just like,
I would have passed out from a panic.
I'm going to lose my mind.
My stress would have been way too high.
But but the thing was too, I was going from snow down to Florida. It was great. Yeah. And what really saved me is my brother-in-law. So my sister was like, she was about ready to pop, man. Like she was ready to pop her baby. And my brother-in-law, you know, he's got the other two kids. And then, so the four of them are just a big, busy household. Right. So I talked to him and I was like, man, you want to come down to Florida for, you know, my show? And he was like, yeah. You know, I was like, yeah. So it was a good little getaway from him, and me and him just chilled. So that kind of helped keep me in a good headspace. Like,
oh, so you weren't by yourself?
No, man.
Oh, that's
yeah. Great. And it was awesome because it was the first time he wasn't away on a business, like, cause he usually does business trips, but this was just him with me and we were just chilling. Nice. So it was nice to see him kind of chill and hang out, and we could actually spend some time together. So that was really good. Yeah.
That's it. All right, that's cool, man. Yeah, I want to talk to you about that experience before we moved on to our main topic of discussion today. So we are going to be talking about when should you start your first steroid cycle.
Oh,
So,
that's
yeah.
a doozy, man.
Yeah, it is. It's a big one. Obviously, I probably gotten that question a million times. You probably gotten that question a million times. So I'll talk about my kind of experience first, about when I first started, and then how that kind of got me into bodybuilding and how
I haven't even heard the story.
Yeah,
So
so
this is
ridiculous.
new for me. So this is exciting.
Yeah, so in the yesterday's episode of the podcast I posted, I just talked briefly just about kind of how I got into bodybuilding and stuff like that, and how I did a lot of partying before I kind of realized,
Oh, I've never partied.
before I realized I had to start doing something else other than play basketball to get in shape, da 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 da. So I did have this part of my early bodybuilding, I guess, career where I was trying to bodybuild and party at the same time.
I've never done that.
Yeah. And when you do those things, you usually surround yourself with great people that only have your best intentions.
Oh, your mother's in love with them.
Yeah. So basically, I was partying every weekend, but still hitting the gym like 5 days a week. At this point, I had a decent idea of food, like, try to eat 4 or 5 decent meals a day, lots of protein shakes, like, basic understanding of nutrition, right? And taking probably every supplement you could think of, though, like creatine, BCAAs, pre-workout, fucking
the whole
nine, mutant mass, old test boosters, maybe even some.
Oh yeah, animal pack, animal stack.
Spending my minimum wage paycheck on supplements every 2 weeks. And, so my first cycle, I did T400, 800 milligrams a week.
The old T400,
classic. For 8 weeks.
So it's probably like 400, 500.
Well, what do you mean?
Like, because those T400s, man, I don't think there's actually that much in it.
Yeah.
So you're doing like 800. That's probably like 3, 4, 5, depending on the week.
Well, I figure if I was getting T400, it was
you're getting at least half.
Well, I figure it was probably close to 300 milligrams per mil, because you could tell.
Yeah,
you could definitely tell it was a bit more potent than like a 250 mg test, right?
Yeah.
So I figured I was around like 600 milligrams a week of test for my first cycle, which is a little bit too high, but not ridiculous, because that's the only thing I took. Didn't take any Arimidex or any type of aromatization inhibitors. Luckily for me, I now know that I don't need those at all. I don't take any aromas and I don't take any Arimidex. I just don't need it. So that's just like a blessing of genetics. And
well, yeah, I mean, just to interject there, like the thing is with everybody, and this is just a classic, just kind of a thing that people do. They generalize. So they put out a whole map, like this is what you're going to do for 12 weeks, but you can't really, because of course, like with AIs and stuff, those are really dependent on your actual blood work. Like if you have high estrogen, it's smart to manage it. But if you don't have high estrogen, you take it, you're just going to create more problems, because you need a good quality amount of estrogen that's not going to cause you issues. And then even then, a lot of times too, like if you just clean up your diet, or if you take, there's some supplements like DIM. DIM is a natural supplement that actually helps metabolize estrogen in a different, it's just a natural supplement. Even taking a little bit of that, or there's just some guys, man, they just have high estrogen naturally. Like any amount of testosterone, they convert. It's a genetic thing.
Well, here's the thing. Like, so I used to just take that stuff all the time. Like for my first 6-7 years of bodybuilding, who knows how much gains I limited myself.
Yeah, and who knows when
I didn't need it. I probably had low estrogen the entire first 6 years I was bodybuilding, until I figured out when I started working with Dorian that I didn't need this shit at all, and I blew up and got up to 330 pounds. Right. So now, like, and I can see the difference in my physique from not using them. So it was just lucky that back then when I did my first cycle that I didn't need it, because I could have been a guy that did need it and didn't have it and gave myself really bad gynecomastia or something like that and had to go to surgery to get it fixed, right? So anyways, did that cycle, like I said, drank every weekend, partied, still managed to gain 25 pounds and I got leaner for sure. Like I faintly had abs at the start of that cycle, and at the end I had like a full on six pack, and I was 25 pounds bigger. So that was my first experience, and then I didn't use them for a couple years after that, to be honest, because I kind of just went back to school, tried to get my shit together, and then I decided I was going to do my first show. And I think like 6 months before my first show, I just did like a test cycle for 12 weeks, and then I transitioned, did a PCT, and then I did a pre-contest cycle, which was like test probe, mass probe, and tren ace that I did all by myself.
Was that your first time doing tren?
Oh yeah. First time doing a diet, first time doing a prep, and I had a coach, and he was a natural coach. He knew I was using PEDs, but he had only ever worked with natural athletes before.
Yeah.
So he like fucking starved me like I was a natural competitor. And anyways, you know, for my first show, I got shredded. You know, I looked okay, and then that's when the next year I actually hired like a good coach, and then learned all about PEDs and the proper way to use them to a certain extent, right?
But just to interject as well, and this is something that I think a lot of us overlook and stuff. Like, for example, with that coach that you had who was used to training with natural athletes, he's probably a really great coach if you're natural.
No, yeah, totally.
That's what his, no, you know what I mean? So, and I know you weren't saying that in that regard, but it's like a lot of people get defeated, because there's a lot of guys who work with a lot of enhanced athletes, and they don't have really, really good experience with a true natural. So they have a harder time sometimes relating to their decisions with, there's all kinds of different things. But that's the other thing too, is there's a lot of coaches out there that sometimes don't give themselves credit because they try and jump down rabbit holes that they're not prepared to handle. And sometimes you get a lot of people that get hurt, good, or some people that get a lot of help too. So yeah.
But yeah,
that's normal, man. 25 pounds is usually a typical first cycle when you did your first one.
And that's the thing. And I was only 18, and like absolutely didn't to do that, but I did. I still think in my mind I wasted my first cycle, knowing what I know now, obviously, because now we know, okay, when should you start your first cycle, right? You should start your first cycle once you've obviously done everything you can to learn training and learn like how you should train for your body, what works for you. Same thing with nutrition. You should have all that figured out. You should know what foods digest well for you. You should have, at this point, been eating and training like a bodybuilder for probably 3, 4, 5 years to even get to the point where you reach your natural potential, or get to the point where it's getting very difficult to improve just by altering nutrition and training.
Yeah.
And then you got to understand that, why are you taking that next step to be enhanced, right? Like,
I agree.
You have a chance to become a pro bodybuilder or a pro physique athlete and go somewhere with that, or are you just kind of taking steroids because with no intention of competing, but you want to push yourself further? Like, in my opinion, that's okay if you want to do that, because it's totally a personal decision. And I would understand that too. Even if I was someone who wasn't competing, I'm still competing with myself. And if I ever got to the point where I was in the gym not making progress anymore, like that would kind of suck, to be honest. So I could easily see why someone who was just, wants to push themselves and try to reach their potential would use PEDs, even if they don't want to compete like on an actual stage. But again, are those risks going to be worth it, right? Like what's the reward, right? Because you are changing the chemistry of your body. You're not going to know how you react to these things until you actually start doing them, right? People can tell you their experience, but it means nothing. Like, people ask me all the time, like, what can I expect with this? What can I expect with that? And I'm like, you got to do it to find out. And your dosage is going to depend on how you react. Some people can handle more, some people can handle less, some people can't handle any at all. And some people, no matter how much you take, it's not going to do shit for you anyway, besides give you negative side effects. Right?
Yeah.
But I think it's safe for us to say that, when you, at the very least, about starting a cycle, you should have pretty extensive knowledge in your nutrition and your training, and you should have tried for a long time to get the most that you can out of those things. And then, obviously from there, it's a personal decision why you're going to do it. But standard You should have the training and nutrition down pat. You should have pushed yourself as far as you can with those things. Try to reach your natural potential and then pull the trigger.
Yes, I agree 100%. And the other thing as well, which is, you know, this kind of comes with, I mean, you shouldn't even have to mention it, but also knowing where your health is at. So for example, if regardless of what age you are, if you're thinking about going down that path, which like you said, it's a personal choice. And that's the thing. We could sit here and talk for 14 days about every single potential avenue of whatever, or all the stuff that we've seen. Man, like I've seen thousands and thousands of cycles, and I've seen people go through them, like different like, man, this has been like 10, 11 years that I've been involved in this kind of
ways to do it, right?
And of course, the social media has come out. It's become more of a justification for regular people who don't even need to compete to kind of have an outlet for that. Oh, well, you know, this is why I'm going to do it. And like, it's just one of those things. It's a personal choice. So it's like, if you're going to go down that route, and you don't know where that's going to go, you should at least go get your blood work checked, you know.
Yeah, because it's not even an option unless you're healthy. Like
exactly.
I know
because you could go get your blood work done, and you could come back and your doctor would be like, oh, wow, like this is going on. And you get checked out, you might have XYZ going on and you didn't even know.
Yeah. And that's where guys get in trouble, because guys, I mean, there's so many guys out there doing steroids that don't get their blood work done. I get my blood work done at minimum every 6 months. And I'm pretty close to my doctor, and I'm lucky to have that relationship with him. But like, I'm big on it. Like, I will not start a cycle unless I get my blood work done first. And
that's the thing.
And my doctor always gives me the okay. Like, I ask him straight up, like, okay, here it is. Like, am I good to start a cycle? And I tell him what I'm doing, and he's like, yeah, go ahead. Like, you should be fine. Because for me, if I ever had like, you know, high liver enzymes or something was going on with my kidney readings, I'm like, why would I start a cycle? That when I know it's going to affect those numbers in another way. Like, I expect my blood work to be a little funky halfway through a cycle, right? But
yeah, well, that's
and I can live with that. Yeah, because like, that's obvious, and I can live with that, knowing that, okay, I'm coming off in 6 more weeks. I'm going to take 6 or 8 weeks off, get my shit together, make sure I'm healthy for a little while before I start another one, right? But the fact that these people want to jump on steroids, not even knowing what's going on inside their body, when like, you could be on the brink of kidney disease, do a steroid cycle, and then you're on dialysis maybe for the rest of your life, just because you never got your blood work done before you started your cycle, right? So that's another big thing you got to take in consideration, because if you start a steroid cycle and it just makes you a sick person, you're not going to make gains. And even if you do for the short term, you're going to get sick. When your major organs is going to stop functioning properly, and then you're not going to be able to eat, you're not going to be able to train, you're not going to be able to do any of that. So that's another big thing for sure, right?
Yeah, and I mean, like, with the average person too, because what's funny is we're talking about this in terms of our 1% of 1% experience, and in terms of what we do. How many people can sit at home and be like, okay, am I honestly not partying at all? Because I guarantee and this is not to point at anything. This is just a simple thing that we try and like not to correlate things. It's like, oh, I want to do this, you know, but this is going on too. Like, you know, if I'm drinking twice a week, like, fuck, add in this. What's that going to do? But see, guys are just like, So that's the other thing too. Like, if you're going to do it, then you definitely should be getting your blood work done. Like, like, if you know that you can't be, like, if you're naive and you're ignorant like that, it's going to be the thing that kills you. Your own ignorance, man.
Put it this way, like, you know, I'm adamant about getting my blood work done. Obviously I take stuff, but I also take a boatload of health supplements every day.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Because like, I don't want to be the guy that, you know, that fucks himself up.
Oh yeah, Morgan, look at him, you know, blah, blah.
Not a good look, man.
Yeah.
Like,
but the other thing is too, in reality, and look aside, it's like, I hate seeing guys who are passionate about what they do end up in a situation where being ignorant, and whether it was their own ignorance or people that they looked up to as ignorance, like not saying anything, for months on end, blah, blah, blah. And then something comes up and it's like, oh yeah, like that sucks, dude. You know, like just basically being open, like, you know, you got to be wide open with it. You have to be able to look yourself in the mirror every day and be like, I kind of know where things are at. Like in my head, I know where I'm at. Because if you go and you find out things are really bad, then you have the opportunity to really look yourself in the mirror and be like, do I keep pushing or do I take a break and then maybe in a year from now I'll be fine? But then some people, they just don't even want to know, and then it ends up.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, and you really, because you're gonna face it, dude. You're gonna either face it in the ER, or at home having something happen, and somebody has to convince you to go to the hospital, and then you get checked out, and something really bad. Like, who knows what from? It's typically not from the steroids. It's from other lifestyle choices that the steroids are basically, or even genetic defects, man. Like 5 of your uncles died from heart attacks.
Yeah.
6 of your aunts are on cholesterol medication. Wonder if that's in my gene pool. Like,
exactly. Yeah.
You don't know, right? Because then if you go to your doctor and they're like, oh yeah, like this is the family history. Yeah, it shows up right here. So then what do you think? It's just going to bring your weaknesses to life.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, totally. And it's like you said, like it's one of those things, like if you know it's going south, it's way better to know early before it like completely goes south. Like, you know, just do yourself a favor.
You can't hide from this shit, man. You can't hide. You can't. Yeah, like, you know, it's not like, oh, I got 500,000 followers, man. Like I'm good. It's like your health doesn't care about your status, about what you got plans for. It doesn't care, man.
I mean, every now and then, like, sometimes like you just see guys quietly disappear, right?
But look at reality here too. There's been a few guys that have there's been, you know, Justin tore his bicep, Antoine retore his bicep, Ryan tore his pec.
Antoine tore his other bicep.
And no, that's what I mean. He just tore his other bicep. And then look at Dusty, man. He had that from, you know, and I mean, that's a sensitive talk. Like I feel horrible, man.
Yeah, it sucks.
Like it's just, but this is life. Yeah. Right. And that's the thing. Like, if you get in those situations, if you have your health's best, like even if you're pushing it, man, because it's just like professional racing, you know, those F1 guys or the guys in those fucking super bikes, there's a huge risk involved, right? But they're doing the things that basically keep them alive in those.
Here's a good one. So there's a quote that I like, and it applies to this. It's, you know, like criminals use this code, right?
Uh-oh.
Okay. Like, don't break the law when you're breaking the law, right?
Okay.
So like if you go rob a bank,
okay, yeah,
don't fucking speed the whole way home.
yeah.
So if you're going to use steroids, right? Like that is your poison. Like pick your poison, right? That's how I've always viewed it. So if I'm off cycle and I've been off cycle for 2 or 3 weeks, and I know I'm not getting on for another 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, that's when I'll go party a little bit. I'll go out drinking and I'll have a couple nights, because for me, drinking 3 or 4 times a year, I drank a little bit more this summer just because of COVID, but that's good enough.
You're trying to make excuses?
It's always been good enough for me, right? Because I do it, it's fun, but then I regret it and I just want to be back on track with bodybuilding. But I have never considered drinking on cycle. Like, well, not anytime recently. Like I have in the past, like when I was younger, but I now know it's like if I'm on cycle, I'm trying to improve for my bodybuilding career, which I take very seriously. I'm not going to bring in alcohol to add more poison to my body. That's only going to hinder my result and throw me a day off eating. And
can I interject here for a minute?
Yeah.
So just for everybody watching this right now, Morgan is from Newfoundland. So when Morgan says, I've never considered drinking on cycle, when a newfie refers to drinking, it's like you're talking about at least a quart. And that doesn't include any other things that might happen throughout the night. And you're literally like, he's talking about complete annihilation. He's not talking about like 2 beers. So for most people, drinking, going out and having a couple drinks is like 2 or 3. You're talking like completely annihilated.
I'm
like
talking about drinking
pissing your pants.
I'm talking about drinking for 2 days straight.
Oh, 2 days straight. See, look, I don't even know.
We go out Friday and we come home Sunday.
Yeah, you definitely shouldn't do that on cycle.
Don't do that,
but that's not drinking, just to let you know.
Yeah, it's a different style where I'm from. But see, that's what happens here. You get out of it early because we all started drinking when we're like 13. And literally by the time we're like 19, 20, we're all kind of sick of it. And we just start like working in the bars at that point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
oh yeah, man. But that's the thing too, like where you're from, literally, I mean, it's every place has its things, but like in Newfoundland, like if you go out one night with the boys, like it's not easy.
Oh, fuck that.
So like, whereas some people here, it's like, you know, they can go out with their friends and be the, like, you know, have one or two drinks and like, haha, I'm going to go to bed early. Like that doesn't happen. You don't go out for one night and like,
It's
you can drive,
thing, man. It's like everyone hits George Street at, you don't know what
George Street, 3 hours later, you're in a whole different situation.
George Street has the most bars per square kilometer than anywhere on earth. And that's,
dude, you don't even need to leave the kitchen. You don't even need to leave the kitchen. You
no,
can end up 3 hours later and you're like, holy smokes, what are we doing here?
Yeah, because like you go to George Street at like 12 or 1 o'clock, you're there till 4, and then you go to your after party after until like 7 or 8. And that's a night out here. Like that, and that's like just like a regular night out here. You know?
Yeah, well, there's a few different types of regular nights out in Halifax, but we won't get into those.
Yeah, well, I mean, Halifax just take things to a different level and
yeah,
escalate the situation. But yeah, okay, so back on topic. So I guess, you know, only other thing I want to talk about this is like, you know, what motivates, you know, people to, you know, it obviously has to do with social media, but and I feel like steroids are just treated like supplements almost these days with how people decide to start them. You know what I mean? Like this whole like natty thing and like natty or not, and it's like, you know, people just start taking steroids like they're going to start taking creatine and completely disregard that they're changing the chemistry of their body and literally altering what it is to be a human and altering their genetics. Like it's such an extreme thing when you really think about what you're doing to yourself. And guys talk about it like they're going to start a new mass gainer. So I guess is that the motivation, just because the way it's viewed now, like it's just not taken as seriously? Like, is that why so many more like just gym rats and like young guys are just starting it? Like,
well, this is what I personally think. I think that nothing has really ever changed in terms of the usage, in terms of the, if anything, I think the average person using steroids, the general education and the general, because here's the thing, before, like when, you know, guys 10 years before we started stuff, it was like, it goes back to like guys, like these were hardcore motherfuckers. Like, you know, like you're going to do a IFBB pro steroid cycle in 1990. Like,
yeah,
that was like a big deal, right? Because you couldn't even get stuff, right? So what happens is, of course, as bodybuilding changes in Hollywood and then stuff becomes more accessible, and then but it's just always been that hardcore like risk taker. But now you're getting the general public who are terrified of taking them, but they just do it anyway. So they literally find any. So everything has been extremely accessible, especially the last 10 to 15 years. And what's happening is people that would never normally, you know, 10 years ago or whatever, other than because of social media and just the overall influence the fitness industry has had. And with that comes the good and the bad. So these things are becoming more accessible, but then there's more information, good and bad. And there's also more decisions to make. So usually people are trying to find the minimalist experience, which is either really good or bad, because they try and, you know, listen to the snake oil guy over here, you know, and then there's this information over here. And that typically tends to be the issue where most problems come from. Is it's like a gamble. It's like, I'm going to pick that information. And then they do it not knowing any better. And it's like, oh, well, the guy told me to do 2 grams a test. You know, like that's what I thought, right? It's like 2 grams a test. You're 19 or you're 20 or you're 21 or you're 22. You know, so you see, I've seen that stuff time after time, you know, and girls too, man, females, like oh, my coach told me to take this, this, and this. It's like, no, I would stop taking that. I would stop taking that tomorrow. Like, don't take any more.
Oh, dude, I know.
Really? Like, what's
The
going to
compounds
happen?
they use. There's like 2 or 3 things that, like, if a girl says to me she's using, I can be like okay with it. And then, like, everything else after that, I'm just like, why are you doing this? Right?
Well,
Unless you're like
this is,
getting ready for the Olympia.
it's a totally different topic because
It is. It
like
is. You're right.
what we're discussing is we're discussing PED use in males, and we're talking about mostly male hormones. So as a male, your chemical makeup, you have an XY chromosome. So even if you identify different, if you have an XY chromosome, male hormones, your body chemistry is designed to metabolize and handle them. Versus a female as an XX chromosome, they're not. So when you introduce, when you introduce a male hormone into your body as a female, you go through male puberty. Plain and simple. So, and as every guy that's gone through male puberty, you see different results. So with girls, it's like, who knows what could happen if you start playing with fire? Because when you get burnt, it's like it has to be at your own risk, but you don't really need to do that.
Like all those risks we kind of talk about with the guys are like amplified by like 100, if not more, for girls.
Yeah, absolutely.
The things you need to pay attention to make sure that you can do it safely and do it responsibly.
Like if we took female contraceptive, we would have the same thing happen because we're taking estrogen. So you would go through like a female cycle period and everything would change and you would feel really fucked up.
Yeah.
You know, you probably would grow tits.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the same kind of effects. It's just male and female hormone. So people just need to understand that, you know, you got to be real with yourself. Like, what am I going to do here? As long as you're okay with it, it's just, I don't know. Yeah.
So I had a question. So, back to guys kind of starting their first cycle. I know my answer to this. We'll end on this too. So, a lot of guys just like to dabble with orals before they start taking injections. What's your thoughts on doing orals for your first cycle as opposed to just say starting with testosterone injections?
There's only one situation that typically is like, I can't say it's a bad idea, but it's not what I would ever suggest. But like there's some guys that want to take like a low dose Anavar for like 4 to 5 weeks. And I mean, it's not anything I would say that's smart to do. Like you should do that for your first time, but it's really hard to create any issues with that if it's for a short time. But at the same time too, this is the other question that comes from that. So if you're willing to do that for a short period of time, then why don't you just do things properly in terms of what's the best objectively to do with the situation? Like if you're going to go down that hole, why don't you just commit to the decision or don't?
Yeah.
Maybe you're not ready.
Well, I think with the oral,
and I think I know where this is going.
Well, I mean, it's just like, because a lot of guys want to do that, right? Like they want to take steroids because they want to get these like quick short-term results, but they don't want to inject themselves. But it's kind of like, it's very, that idea contrasts itself, right? Because I mean, we know as experienced bodybuilders that orals affect us like for a very temporary period of time, right? So like you might only take it to start like an off-season cycle for 4 or 6 weeks, or you'll use it for like the last 6 or 8 weeks of a prep leading into a show, because we know like we're only going to get out of that oral for as long as we're on it. Basically, once you come off an oral, it's in and out of your system so fast that you're not going to get any really long-lasting results from it. And the fact that orals are more toxic to your body than the injects are for how many times they need to pass through your liver and be processed. So basically you want to start, your first steroid cycle with something that is only going to work for as long as you're on it. And it's going to be more toxic to your body than taking a good low dose first cycle dosage of testosterone, which we can say would be anywhere from the 300 milligram to 500 milligram range, roughly. Everyone's different, right?
Well, the one thing to interject there is that the main issue that comes up is that if you start taking something that is going to remove your testosterone based hormone, like for instance, if you do Winstrol or something else, like you can take, I think, a low dose Dianabol and it kind of replaces, because it's a testosterone, it's from the testosterone family. So if you take Dianabol at a low dose, you can replace and you won't have those issues. But then the problem is that if you're going to do that, you might as well just take a testosterone injectable, you know? And that's just like you're saying, right? Like there's better ways to go about what you want to do and achieve. And if you can minimize the different issues, especially toxicity, because, you know, that's just the one thing you don't want to have from this. And you don't need much because you're very sensitive.
Yeah. Exactly.
You know, and there's only so far you're going to go.
Yeah.
Once you hit a certain amount, you're not really going to be able to metabolize more.
Yeah, but you're going to deal with the side effects from taking an excess amount, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I think. So, and I guess that's kind of where we'll end it. Like very general advice, you know, because obviously anyone who clicked this is probably someone, you know, who's interested in this topic, maybe interested in doing their first cycle. So, you know, I would just say from my personal experience and experience working with other clients that, you know, if you're going to go down that road, again, I'm not a medical professional, so I'll say that first of all. And
no, we both aren't.
I'm not telling anybody what you should go and do. I'm just talking about what has worked with my experience and helping other people with this. You know, for your first cycle, you're going to need, like I said, anywhere from like 300 to 500 milligrams testosterone per week dosage wise, because that's going to give you a dose of synthetic testosterone that's going to put you in probably a fairly high range of testosterone, definitely enough to get
super physical amount.
Yeah. But it's not like, you know, 750 to 1,000 mgs a week, which is probably like my dosage because I've been doing this for so long and I've cycled for so long. Like that's kind of where my numbers need to be to benefit. But when you're doing your first cycle, you're so sensitive to this stuff, you really want to take as little as you can and get the most out of it. Because then once you do your first cycle, your next cycle, you're going to want to just take a little bit more tests. And then you'll reap the benefits of that. And then your next cycle, maybe you can add in another compound and you'll reap the benefits of that. Basically, every time you do a cycle, you want to just add a little bit more to get the most out of it without taking a bunch and probably getting the same out of it. Because if you're just starting out and you take, you know, 3 different compounds at all high doses, your body can only do so much with it anyway, right? So you honestly will probably get just as much out of that as if you just did the 400 to 500 milligrams of testosterone a week, but you just won't be as healthy doing all that other stuff for no reason, right? So
yeah. And the other thing is too, is that, you know, you might do your first cycle and it might turn out to be not what you want to do. You might not continue again, or you might do your first cycle and like you said, you end up getting to a second one and a third, or there's no question. So the other thing is too, you want to leave every time that you want to go down that road and make that personal choice to use whatever you use. You want to leave the room to, you know, at least be able to make a decision from that. You don't want to put yourself in a different spot. And the other thing as well is it's mental health stuff too, man. Like on paper and on, you know, numbers and chemistry and stuff, you know, there's a lot of things that can or may happen, but realistically, you start mixing different hormones, you're going to, you know, you might have a progesterone, you might have a DHT, a testosterone, and how those all interact together. And then maybe you have depression, maybe you don't, maybe you have anxiety, maybe you don't, maybe you're schizophrenic. Like this is all the world we live in. You know, if you start throwing that stuff in, especially like Tren, well, like the stories, man, like it's just, you don't need to go down that road. Right.
And that's something I can say for myself. Like, you know, I don't deal with side effects from steroids physically, with the exception of my hair. But I do deal with them mentally. Like there's certain, like, for example, like I don't take DECA. There's certain like, you know, any steroid that gives me prolactin based side effects.
So 19 hours, you kind of avoid those.
Yeah, I do, but like, you know, Tren, I'll take obviously, because
I avoid them, but you know, Tren.
Yeah. I'll do, but like, you know what? Because like in the
you manage it. You basically, you can manage it. You have it like, because that's the other thing too. You're in a position where you want to compete.
Yes.
And you understand
right now.
you plan for it though,
Yeah.
Morgan.
Yeah.
You mentally know, okay, 6 weeks,
Yeah.
15,000 weeks. I mean, now for like your prep,
Yeah.
you know what's going to come,
Exactly.
but that's you.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Everybody's like, oh yeah. It's like, no, that's not you though.
Yeah, like, and then
Trust me.
other people will just take the shit and just not even know what they're getting into from the side.
No, man.
Right?
It's just like a wild horse.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
end all be all, first cycle, stick to testosterone only, do yourself a big favor. Don't be in a rush to inject a ton of stuff, because the other thing is injecting sucks. That's something that not a lot of people talk about, but you want to inject the least amount of things into your body for as long as you can before you have to graduate to injecting more and more, because that's like a whole nother deal. And it's probably the worst part about doing steroids, with the
And
side effects.
first and foremost, too, because this applies to everyone, this is all in the context that you should be doing this legally. You should be going and doing this with a doctor.
Yeah.
Obviously people are going to make choices on their own. It's a personal decision if they want to do otherwise. But the best piece of advice that we can put out there is that if you can do this, there's a lot of countries that you can, there's a lot of different doctors. Maybe you're in a situation where you actually have low testosterone, so it's not really too far out of the scope to consider addressing that. But first and foremost, in optimal position, you should be doing it legally under a health professional, or at least if you're going to be doing it, get your doctor. Don't lie to them. Tell your doctors what you're doing. Like, that's the other thing too. So if you're choosing your own way to do it, which everyone has their own personal choices, have a health professional supervise you. Like, it's pretty simple.
Goes without saying. Definitely have some sort of medical professional advising you, looking over your blood work, make sure you're healthy. Because without your health, all this means nothing, and it's not going to be fun. And you don't want to be the guy that messes himself up by abusing steroids when it could have easily been avoided if you just did what you should have did from a precautionary standpoint, right?
Absolutely. And that's just the reality of it.
And that's a good place to leave the episode of the podcast. I think we covered what we wanted to cover today. Guys, if you tuned in, we really hope you enjoyed this video. There's going to be lots more coming from me and Dana. Any specific topics you want us to cover, drop in the comments below. We're going to post this up on Instagram. So yeah, stay tuned. Dana, thanks a lot for coming on, man. Had a great time.
Thanks for having me. It's going to be great. I can't wait.
We're going to keep it going. We're going to get these out as often as we can. It's something I want to do really consistently. So everybody stay tuned, and thanks for watching. We'll see you later.
See you later.